You know what's strange? The most dangerous limitations a person can have are the ones that feel completely normal from the inside. Not the obvious ones. Not the ones people warn you about. The quiet ones. The ones that have been running so long, so consistently, so invisibly, that they don't even feel like limitations anymore. They just feel like personality. Like that's just how I am. Like that's just how life works. And I don't know who needs to hear this today, but there is a version of your life that is being quietly blocked. Not by your circumstances. Not by other people. Not by bad luck. By 8 specific mental habits that your brain developed, probably a long time ago, that made sense once, and have been costing you ever since. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. I'm not going to make this comfortable, but I am going to make it useful, because every single one of these habits has a mechanism, and every mechanism can be interrupted, if you're willing to actually look. 7 minutes. 8 habits. Let's find out which ones are living rent-free in your head. Habit number 1. Here is something nobody says out loud. Every system you live inside, every institution, every media platform, every authority structure, every social norm, was built by people with interests. And those interests are not always yours. That is not a conspiracy theory. That is just how power works. And the single most effective way to keep people operating inside a system that doesn't serve them is to make questioning that system feel unnecessary, rude, disloyal, paranoid. Research in cognitive psychology identifies a trait called need for cognition, the intrinsic motivation to think critically, examine claims, and interrogate assumptions. Studies consistently show that people high in need for cognition are significantly more resistant to misinformation, manipulation, and false authority, and significantly better at detecting when they're being misled. People low in need for cognition don't question, not because they're incapable, but because questioning was never rewarded in their environment. Agreement was rewarded. Compliance was rewarded. Fitting in was rewarded. And so the questioning muscle never got built. Here's the thing about that muscle. Every single time you accept something without asking why, you are outsourcing your thinking to whoever told you. And whoever told you has their own agenda, their own blind spots, their own errors. You are not being respectful when you never question. You are being convenient. The most powerful question in any situation is 2 words. Says who? Habit number 2. Let's be clear about something before we go any further. The attention crisis is not your fault. You are living inside an ecosystem of the most sophisticated attention capture technology ever built, engineered by teams of behavioral scientists whose entire job is to make sure you cannot stay on one thing for more than 90 seconds. That is the context. But here's the truth inside that context. The ability to sustain focused attention on a single cognitively demanding task for an extended period against the pull of distraction is becoming one of the most valuable and rarest cognitive skills on Earth. Research from the University of California, Irvine found that after a single interruption, the average person takes over 20 minutes to return to their original task at full cognitive engagement. And in an environment of constant interruption, most people never get there at all. The practical consequence: shallow work fills the hours. Deep work never happens. Goals that require sustained thinking never get completed. And a creeping sense of busy but not progressing becomes the permanent background noise of daily life. Cal Newport's research on deep work found that the capacity for extended, uninterrupted focus is the primary differentiator between people who produce exceptional output and people who produce average output, regardless of raw intelligence. You don't need more time. You need longer stretches of unbroken attention. Start with 25 minutes. One task. Phone face down. Every day, the focus you rebuild will compound faster than almost any other cognitive investment you can make. Habit number 3. Something goes wrong. And the story that forms, immediately, automatically, with complete conviction, is about what someone else did, what they said, how they behaved, how it's their fault. And the story is probably not entirely wrong. Other people do cause problems. Other people do behave badly. Other people are genuinely responsible for genuinely harmful things. But here's what the blame story does that nobody talks about. The moment the fault lands entirely outside you, your agency lands there too. Because if the problem is completely their fault, then the solution is also in their hands. And you are waiting, powerless, stuck, until they change. Research in locus of control, one of the most studied constructs in personality psychology, consistently shows that people with an internal locus of control, who believe their actions meaningfully influence their outcomes, dramatically outperform people with an external locus of control across virtually every measurable life domain. Not because internal locus people have easier lives. They don't. But because they are always asking a different question. External locus asks, whose fault is this? Internal locus asks, given this situation, what can I actually do? One question produces a story. The other produces a move. You cannot control what other people do. You can always control your next move. The second you stop waiting for the person who caused the problem to solve it, your life starts moving again. Habit number 4. It never looks like the same mistake. That's the point. Last time it was that job. This time it's this relationship. Last time it was that city. This time it's this business. Different characters, different setting, different details, same fundamental dynamic, same root cause, same outcome. And each time, genuine surprise. Because from the inside, it really does look like a different situation. Research on error-based learning shows that accurate pattern recognition across varied contexts is one of the core functions of experiential intelligence, the ability to extract transferable lessons from specific events. When this function is weak, the brain stores experiences as episodes rather than as data. The story of what happened gets remembered. The underlying variable that caused it gets missed. Psychologists call this a failure of schema updating, the brain's process of revising its internal models based on feedback from reality. The result, the model stays wrong, and the wrong model keeps generating wrong predictions, and the wrong predictions keep producing wrong outcomes. The question that breaks the loop, not why did this happen, but what did I bring into this situation that I've brought before? Because the common variable across every version of the same mistake is you. That's not a condemnation. That's the most useful piece of information you have. Habit number 5. Not because the instructions are complicated. They're not. But because following instructions requires something that isn't often discussed, the ability to hold multiple steps in working memory simultaneously while executing the first one, without losing the second and third. Research on working memory capacity consistently identifies it as one of the strongest predictors of general fluid intelligence. It's not about how much you know. It's about how much you can actively hold and manipulate in your mind at one time. When working memory is limited, instructions don't all fit. The first step gets done. By then the second is gone. The third was never really registered. And what looked like confusion about simple instructions was actually a capacity constraint that had nothing to do with the instructions themselves. Here's what makes this worse. Most people experiencing this never identify it accurately. They feel stupid. They feel slow. They apologize. But they don't know what's actually happening, which means they can't address it. Working memory is trainable. Dual end-back exercises, chess, complex reading, and deliberate practice in holding multi-step processes in mind have all shown measurable working memory improvements in research settings. The limitation isn't permanent, but it requires being named accurately before it can be addressed. You're not confused because you're incapable. You're confused because you're carrying the instructions in a container that hasn't been stretched yet. Habit number 6. Something happens. In a meeting, in a conversation, on a call, in traffic, in a store, and the emotional response, the visible, unfiltered, fully expressed emotional response, comes out. Right there, in front of whoever is watching. And afterward, always afterward, there is regret. Because the moment is gone, but the impression stays. The relationship is changed. The professional dynamic has shifted. Something was revealed that cannot be unrevealed. Research in emotional regulation, one of the most robust areas of modern psychology, shows that the ability to modulate emotional expression in social contexts is not about suppressing feelings. It's about executive control over behavioral output. The feeling is real. The feeling is valid. The feeling is allowed to exist. What's being managed is the decision of whether, when, how, and how much of that feeling gets externalized in this specific context with these specific people. High emotional regulation is not coldness. It is not fakeness. It is the recognition that you are always communicating, and that an unregulated emotional response communicates things about your stability, your reliability, and your judgment that are very difficult to walk back. The amygdala fires. The prefrontal cortex decides what happens next. Training that second step, the gap between feeling and expression, is one of the highest value investments in social intelligence that any person can make. Because your emotions are information. They are not instructions. Habit number 7. You're solving the problem directly in front of you. And the solution works. For this moment, for this situation, for this specific friction. But 3 months later, a consequence arrives that seems to come from nowhere. Except it didn't come from nowhere. It came directly from the solution you applied in that moment. Because the solution was optimized for the immediate problem and no one asked what it would produce downstream. Research in systems thinking and cognitive complexity shows that the ability to zoom out, to hold the immediate situation and its broader context simultaneously, to trace second and third order consequences before acting, is one of the most clearly differentiated cognitive skills between average and exceptional decision makers. It requires something specific, The ability to hold two levels of analysis in mind at once. The close and the far. The now and the later. The tree and the forest. Most people are trained by modern life to optimize for the immediate. Fast feedback. Quick results. Instant gratification. Big picture thinking runs on a different time scale. It asks, if this works exactly as planned, what world does that create? And do I want to live in that world? One question, asked before every significant decision, not after. The highest quality decisions come from people who can feel the emotion, extract the information it contains, and then run that information through a separate analytical process before acting. Feel it, note it, then think. In that order. Every time.